Hey everyone, today I'll be chatting about the extraordinary Jess Judd. Jess is a fantastic writer who writes bedtime stories for kids and helps run a podcast called Bedtime FM, in which she reads bedtime stories to kids who don't get stories read to them at night, which is incredible. I find Jess and her work to be super inspirational because it's a really special moment having a bedtime story read to you as a kid. Still my favourite part, except I read the books to myself. We couldn't find a time that suited for a face-to-face interview, so we decided that we would do an online one. Jess, thank you so much for letting me interview. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a bit about Bedtime FM?
So Bedtime FM was created by my friend Rob Griffiths, who lives in England. So he was reading bedtime story to his eldest son and kind of just realised the importance of every kid having access to bedtime stories and having stories read to them and having that available to them for free and, not having to pay for it. So he created Bedtime FM, which is an independent podcast producer. So we produce two separate podcasts. Our Bedtime FM, our Bedtime Story podcast is called Storytime, and then we also have Peace Out, which is a mindfulness kind of calming down podcast for kids. So we run with those.
That's amazing that he took it, because it is a special moment. And it is valuable because it builds your creative mind. It really helps you enjoy stories, and it can build like a bunch of, it can build a bunch of passions.
Yeah, well, you always see, or I at least always see, on my Facebook come up, the little thing that says if you read to a kid one story every day, by the time they're 5, they've heard like 50 million words, or I never remember how much it is, but it's lots and lots of words. And so that's something that we hope to, be a part of and bring children stories.
What made you want to be a part of Bedtime FM? Sorry, I got stuck in the word there.
So about maybe almost 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I was looking for something for my kids to listen to at bedtime. We always read them bedtime stories, but when I was a kid, I remember, listening to audiobooks or music while to sleep, and so I wanted to find something for my kids that they could listen to. So I was just going through the different podcasts, and I found Storytime. And I just really liked, most of them were all American based, and not that there's a problem with that, but I really liked the fact that he was English and it was different to everything else that I was hearing. And Rob's voice is like super calming and kind of, you just sit there and listen and, kind of just helps the kids get off sleep. I chose that for them to listen to, and we listened to it for maybe about 8 months or so. And then 3 years ago, last week, Rob put up a post on Facebook saying that he was looking for people who might be interested in volunteering, and my husband was like, oh, you could do that. So I flicked him an email and was like, hey, I've got a bit of spare time, I'd love to kind of help out, because I'd never been involved with a podcast before, and I thought it might be fun. And I started off just narrating stories, and we used to kind of just go out and find them out for, like free stories on the internet, and we'd contact the authors and ask if we could narrate their stories. But now these days I write stories for it, which is amazing. I get to narrate my own stories as well as other amazing authors' stories. I get to, I've learnt like how to edit it and stuff, and I also do a whole bunch of the admin kind of behind the scenes stuff for Bedtime FM, and it's just great to be involved with something that's bringing something awesome to kids all around the world.
That's just incredible. It sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it is lots of fun.
What is it like working on the radio?
Well, like I said, it is lots of fun. For us, it can be a bit tricky because, like, it's not like I can kind of get up in the morning and go to work and, you know, see my work colleagues and talk about what we're doing and do our stuff. We're all volunteers, so we're all over the world, and we all have our own part-time or full-time jobs and kind of do this as an extra thing. So Rob, like I mentioned, he lives in England. I live here in Perth in Western Australia. Chanel, who does our Peace Out podcast, she lives in Canada, in Toronto. And then Kelly lives in Southern California. Nicole, I can never remember where she lives. She's the newest member of our team. She actually has her own podcast as well. And then we had a girl called Amy who was helping out as well. And she lives in New Zealand. So communication was always kind of a bit tricky. Like I would post something in our Facebook group and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or post a new story and, you know, say, let me know your thoughts. And you'd have to wait like almost a full day to actually get everybody to be able to read it and give you their feedback. Because while I'm posting, you know, everyone else is asleep. And so I have to wait for them to wake up to be able to read it. And by the time they're awake and reading what I've put, I've gone to bed and, you know, yeah.
Yeah, like once a week, the others asleep.
Exactly, yeah. So I have an app on my phone that like I can click on it and it will tell me like what the times are in all the different countries where all the people live, and I'm like, okay, well, he's asleep, she's awake, or, you know, I can message this person, they should be awake now. Yeah, so it's tricky, but it's heaps of fun, especially being able to collaborate with people all over the world. You know, you get introduced to so much different cultures and language and everything. Like as an Aussie, I would say things like, oh yeah, I'll do it the Savo. And Chanel, the Canadian, was like, what is an arvo? I don't understand. And so I'm like, oh, it just means afternoon, you know. But yeah, it's really interesting when you see the differences between how we talk and how they talk. And yeah, so that's been really fun. Every now and then we get, you know, negative feedback for stories that, you know, people might just not like the way we do it. So like, for example, I wrote a story called Escape to Space, which was a story about how the ancestors of crocodiles and alligators knew that the asteroid was coming to, like, you know, kill off all the dinosaurs, and so they built a rocket ship and flew to the moon. And someone wrote in and was like, how dare you confuse children with, you know, things that isn't right in science. And I'm like, it's a bedtime story, you know, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. I'm not trying to teach children science and say that, oh yes, in history, crocodiles and alligators went to the moon. Like, it's just a bedtime story. But, you know, you just got to kind of deal with that stuff. And most people love it. And, you know, I've just got to accept the fact that not everyone's going to love it, and that's okay. But yeah, it's heaps of fun, and I've learnt heaps of new skills.
Yeah, but bedtime stories are meant to be imaginative. They're meant to
exactly
be fun. They're not meant to be and every single one of the dinosaurs were wiped out. End of story.
Yeah,
You know what the kids are like under their bed, scared, like, oh.
No, I know. So I don't know. Some people just take things too seriously, I think.
And it takes all the fun out of bedtime stories if you take
exactly. You might as well just pull out a dictionary or an encyclopedia if that's what you want. Just read that. It might put you to sleep quickly though, because they're pretty boring.
Yeah. How to get your kid to sleep 101. Read them a dictionary. They'll be asleep in seconds to get away from that.
That's it.
Where do you get the inspiration from your stories from? Like, really?
So from different places. So some of the inspiration will just come from, you know, situations or experiences or places or things in my everyday life. So I wrote a story called Charlie's Letterbox, and that's a story about a boy who's moved house, and his letterbox notices that he's really sad because every day he goes to check the letterbox and there's no mail there because he's at a new school and in a new house and he has no friends. So his letterbox grows legs and walks around the neighborhood and steals mail from other people's mailboxes, so that this kid has mail in his letterbox. So the inspiration from that story came from, we were driving to school one morning, my husband and our boys, and on our way to school there is a letterbox that has legs on it. So it's like a pair of legs with a little letterbox sitting on the top. And so they started having a discussion about, oh, what would happen if that letterbox came to life and wandered around the neighborhood? And they're like, oh, you should write a story about that. So that's kind of where that one came from. And then I have a story called The Elephant Upstairs. So that came from, I was editing a story that Rob had recorded, and he had people that were upstairs above him, and while he was recording they were thumping around upstairs on the floor and making lots of noise, and so you heard the thump 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 come through the microphone, and he just sighed and said, oh, hello, elephant upstairs, and then kept recording. And I was like, oh, that would be a really interesting story. What would happen if there was an elephant living upstairs to you? So that's where that came from. Yeah, so a lot of the time it just kind of comes from me from, you know, things that are happening, and I go, oh, I wonder what that would, you know, be like in a story, or what would happen if that actually was true. We also have, like I mentioned before, we're volunteers for our podcast. We don't charge for any of the stories. It's all free. So we also don't put ads or anything on. We don't believe in advertising to children. So the way that we keep our stories free and on the air is just through donations from our listeners. So through our Patreon page, there is an option in our gold tier to request a story. And so kids will, you know, when they're our Patreons, they'll request, oh, I'd like a story written about this, 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 and this. And so I kind of take their suggestions and I mold that into a story specifically for them. Yeah, so some of it comes from there as well.
That's incredible. So you get your inspiration from everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah, lots of places. The place I most find inspiration hits me is when I'm sitting in a nice warm bath reading a book. And then I'll just suddenly think, oh, that would make a really good story.
It's so funny how inspiration can come from anywhere.
I know, yeah.
Hit you and you're like, oh, gotta write.
Exactly. And you're like, how has nobody ever thought of this before?
Do you base any of your characters on people you know, or not really?
So a little bit of both. My own personal stories that I write, like from my own imagination and inspiration, I don't base those on people that I know. Only because, like, for me personally, I feel like my characters each have their own personality and their own skills and strengths and weaknesses. And for me, when I try and base it on a person that I know or a person that I met, I find that I tend to write that character more like that person, you know, and I feel like it's limiting my characters to be the person that they actually are and that they need to be in the story. So yeah, for me, I might like see someone and think, wow, that guy has crazy hair, and that might inspire me for a character. And so kind of loosely based on them maybe, but yeah, I try not to sort of base them on people that I know. But my stories for people that write in to us to request stories, obviously if they say, I'd like it to be about me and my best friend and, you know, whatever, then I base it on them. So probably the best time that I did that was we had a mum write in. Her mother, so the nana of her children, was fighting stage 4 cancer in 5 different places in her body, and she said, oh, you know, like they love to snuggle up on the couch and listen to your stories together, and you know, I'd love it if it's not too much trouble, if you could write a story for them to kind of, you know, get them through this next little bit. And so yeah, I wrote that story. Specifically, the 2 kids were in the story, the mum and the nana were in the story, and I kind of started it out like as just like a fun thing about a crime-fighting superhero nana. And then as I wrote it, it kind of just sort of morphed into something much deeper and heartfelt than actually what I'd even kind of meant for it to be. And then the nana actually passed away a couple of months after we released the story, and one of her friends emailed me and said, thank you so much for this story that you've written. Like the way that you wrote Nana in the story is exactly the kind of person she was in real life. You know, she always looked out for other people. She was so soft-hearted. She'd do anything for her family. You know, and yeah, how listening to this story had actually helped her and the family and other friends to, you know, reflect on the life of this incredible woman. So yeah, that was probably the most amazing time that I've ever written a story about anyone based on real life. But yeah.
That's amazing. That's just so sweet. Sorry, I'm probably going to tear up, but that's so sweet. It's amazing that you managed to take that story and just make it so amazing and friendly.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. We had lots of, listeners write in and, say how much that had actually helped them or their children to, get through that a loss that they had experienced in their family. I think that was probably one of the best moments I've had in my whole writing and podcasting career was doing that and getting the incredible feedback from that story that I got.
That's incredible. Do your kids help with your stories?
They do. They will often suggest stories that I should write or things that I should write about, or they'll be like, what would happen if, this, what would happen if our cat, was a ninja and would get out at night and go and do things, and okay, well, we can write a story about that if you want. Probably the way they help me the most is that whenever I write a story, I always read it to them first. So they're the first people that ever get to see my stories. So if they're like, oh no, I didn't like it, or if they make suggestions, or if they love it, then I kind of go with their feedback. Because I know that they're not just going to be like, yeah, Mum, we loved it, even if they didn't. So yeah, but they definitely help me to kind of, sort stuff out.
So they're kind of like your little writing assistant minions.
Yeah, like my editors, maybe.
That way, well, I guess that's a bit easy because then you don't really have to do that much editing.
Yeah, this is true.
Editing is annoying.
Yeah, it sucks.
You write such a story and you have to take so much out.
I know. Oh, I know. It's terrible.
So bad.
Yeah.
Do your kids listen to your stories at night? They must love having you on the radio.
Yeah, they do. They love listening to my stories. So my kids actually listen to lots of different podcasts now as well. So my youngest, his favorite podcast to listen to is Wow in the World, which is like a science kind of podcast. Talks about all sorts of different incredible things in our world. And then my eldest, he likes Wow in the World. He likes one called Pants on Fire, which is like a kid has to come in and like pick between two people, like who's telling the truth and who's telling a lie. And then, there's a few others that he really enjoys listening to. But he always, whenever he listens to story time, he's like, I don't want to listen to anybody else's stories. I just want to listen to your stories and just you narrating them. So yeah, that's really special and really nice.
Oh, that's so sweet. So now we're on to the speed questions.
Okay.
What are you writing at the moment?
All right. At the moment, I am writing a few different stories. So I've got 3 on the go that are requested stories for our listeners. One is a Hanukkah story. One is about kids who find a snow giant in the mountains. And then the other one, I can't quite remember, but there's another one in there as well. And then I'm also working on a couple of kind of longer, my hope is they're going to be like novel chapter story kind of things. I'm not really sure how long they're going to be yet, but that's what I'm working on. One of them is like a kid's story, and then one of them is kind of more like a young adults kind of fantasy sci-fi sort of book. So yeah.
What's your favourite ice cream flavour?
My favourite ice cream flavour is peanut butter and chocolate from Baskin-Robbins, because it's like chocolate ice cream with like chunks of peanut butter all mixed through it. It's absolutely delicious.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's my favourite one. Like every time we have a Baskin-Robbins like 2 minutes walk from our house. So whenever we want special ice cream, we just go there. And my husband is always like, you should try something else. I'm like, no, I know that I like the peanut butter and chocolate. That is all I'm going to have. So yeah, it's just amazing. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm the same with my salted caramel ice cream, because I know I like it. I don't need to try anything else. What happens if you don't like it? You spend all that money on some ice cream.
Exactly.
You don't really like it.
Exactly.
That's
And, you know, like
I never tried new ice cream.
yeah, you know what you like, and you're allowed to just have what you like. That's okay.
What's one of your favourite stories you've read? If you have one. If you don't.
Favorite stories I've read?
Written. If you.
Oh, written. Favorite stories I've written. My favorite story that I've written is probably one called Elsie Meets a Witch. I just really, really like the feel of that story. It's almost like a modern day fairy tale kind of thing. Yeah, that's probably my favorite one that I've written.
How long did it take? How long does it take you to write your stories?
Few days. It kind of depends on the amount of research that I have to do. But because I have a proper job, I have to kind of space that out. So like I might write for a couple of hours and then I'll, you know, go to work, or I'll have to look after the kids, or, you know, whatever. And then at night I'll come home and I'll put the kids to bed and I'll write for a couple more hours. So all in all, it's probably like, a day or two maybe, but it's kind of spaced out in pockets of time.
Oh, sorry. Who is your favourite or most inspirational author?
So my favorite author would be Raymond Feist, who writes incredible fantasy stories. He's got like 24, in fact, they're right here behind me.
The yellow one?
Yeah, these ones all here. He's got like 24 books in his set in like this one world. They're just incredible. I absolutely love his writing. But my most inspirational author would probably be Tolkien. I just love The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and yeah, all of that.
Do you prefer cats or dogs?
I prefer dogs, but I only have a cat at this point in time because we have a little house. So we had to settle for getting a little animal that kind of doesn't need quite so much attention. Cats are good because you just kind of feed them and scratch them behind the ears and they're happy. Whereas, you know, dogs, you have to walk them and play with them all the time, which is good, but, you know, you have to have the time to do that. So.
Yeah, exactly. And as much as playing with a little puppy is so fun and fulfilling and it's just like awesome, you gotta have some time to do your writing and look
exactly.
Up.
If I had a dog, I would just play with the dog all day. I'd never get any writing done, I think.
I have a dog, but I sadly have to refrain from petting her all day long and just feeding her.
Yes,
I have to refrain. Do you prefer reading ebooks or hard books?
I definitely prefer hard copy books. I just prefer being able to hold it in my hands and smell it and all of that. But I do sometimes read books on my phones, you know, so that like if I'm out, I can quickly read it. And yeah, but definitely hard copy.
What is this? Sorry. Let's stop for. Do you prefer reading ebooks or hard books?
I definitely prefer reading hard copy books. I love just like being able to hold them and smell them, and you know, having an actual book is so much better. But I do sometimes read ebooks like on my phone. But my favorite place to read is in the bath. And if I dropped my phone in the bath, I'd probably be in trouble. I have dropped a book in the bath a couple of times before, which is also terrible, but a lot easier to replace than my phone. So hard copy books, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. I love the smell, feel. It's just.
Me too.
Yeah. Where's your favorite place to write? Is it?
Sorry.
Is it the bath?
The bath. I don't know why. I just really like to relax in the bath and read and write. I don't have an office or anything at the moment, so our plan when we move house is to have an actual office space that I can use for writing and podcasting, and my hubby can use for recording for the radio as well. But at the moment I don't really have a writing space, so I do it kind of either at the kitchen table or in the bath. Or I'll take my MacBook like down to a cafe and just sit there with a coffee and write there. Yeah.
Well, baths are definitely relaxing, so they do the job.
They are. Yes.
Do you remember the first book you ever read or your favourite childhood book?
Yeah, so when I was in year 4, my mum bought me these lovely books back here, which is the Famous Five and their special edition yellow hardcover books. So they're the first books I remember like really getting into as a kid and really enjoying reading. So I read my way through them in year 4. My mum kept buying them for me. You know, like I got them as like rewards and stuff. And I think that was just kind of her incentive for me to get into reading and stuff. Is that person calling you again? Right.
Do you remember the first book you ever read or your favourite childhood book?
Yes. So the first books that I remember reading myself are these lovely books here behind me.
Do you remember the first book you ever read or your favourite childhood book?
Yes, the first book I ever remember like physically reading myself are these books behind me right here. So it's the Famous Five series by Enid Blyton. And my mum kind of kept buying them for me like as incentives and, you know, to like do things. I got them as rewards. But I absolutely loved them. I still like read them sometimes now today. But I absolutely adored reading them, and she bought them for me kind of throughout the year, and I read them over year 4. Yeah, so that's probably the first book I ever remember reading myself. But my dad also used to read to me from like The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien, or he also read me the Narnia Chronicles by C.S. Lewis, which I've actually just started reading to my eldest as well. So we're currently reading our way through Magician's Nephew. So that's really exciting that I get to kind of introduce my stories that I was read as a child to my child. So yeah, pretty cool.
What's your biggest achievement so far?
Well, like I said before, with that family that I got to write the story for, that was like pretty incredible to be able to have that kind of an impact on a family just by writing them a story, and then on, you know, other people. But I also got in the top 10 for a writing competition by the Armidale City of Armidale, the Armidale Writers Award last year. So, and that was pretty cool because most of the people that wrote in, it was all like, you know, grown-up stories. When I went to the award ceremony, you know, they said like, oh, we had lots of stories about this and this and this and this, and it was all like adult themes, you know, like, and I was like, oh man, I put in a kid's story. So yeah, I don't think they got very many children's stories handed in, but yeah, I got in the top 10 and got a little award and stuff for that. So that was pretty cool too.
That's amazing. Do you have anything else in the future or any writing being released soon?
Well, I've always got new stuff kind of coming out all the time on story time. So, you know, there's always that. But I'm also, well, my goal would be to actually physically get one or more would be lovely, of my books published, so I can, you know, actually hold it in my hot little hands and read it out of a book, and yeah, that would be incredible. And yeah, also just to actually finish these novel books that I'm trying to write. So, yeah.
You can get there. I definitely believe in you.
Thank you.
Do you have any advice for young writers? Oh my God!
Last question. This is the last question, I think, isn't it?
Yep.
Yep. All right.
Do you have any advice for young writers?
Yes, just believe in yourself, and, you know, write. Even if you think what you're writing is not great, just write it, and, you know, you'll get better the more and more that you write. And, you know, you never know, you might think it's not so good, but someone else might think it's amazing. So, you know, just keep writing. So write every single day. Even if it's like 10, 20 minutes, you know, you don't have to sit down for hours and hours and hours and write, but try to write something, even if it's one paragraph about, you know, this is what I ate today. Just try and write something all the time, and try and read every single day, you know, like before bed, pull out a book and read a chapter a night or something like that. Because the more you read, you know, the more you learn how sentences are structured, how books are structured, you know, you learn story structure and all that kind of stuff. How, you know, Yeah. So just read all the time so that you can, you know, learn things, and also for your own enjoyment, because reading's not just about learning things, but also about actually enjoying the story.
Definitely. Amazing advice. Thank you so much for letting me interview you. This has been
No worries at all.
And,
no worries. Thank you so much for interviewing me.
and for all the people who are wondering how to watch Bedtime FM or Storytime or Peace Out, your podcasts, how can they watch them?
So they can go to our website, bedtime.fm, and you can listen on the website to either of our podcasts, or you can use Apple Podcasts or Google Music. I'm not sure what it is on Google. Any kind of podcatcher that you might have to listen to podcasts, you just search Storytime or search Peace Out and you can find them there. We're also on Spotify, so you can search for us on Spotify and listen in the podcast section. Or you can always just find us on Facebook as well. So just search up Bedtime FM on Facebook and follow us there so that you're always kept up to date with all the new stories that we have and all the new information and competitions or whatever else we might have coming up.
Thank you. So make sure to check out Storytime FM and Peace Out. They look incredible. And make sure to like and share so we can share how extraordinary Jess Judd is.
Thank you.